What is up, basketball fans? I am Jason Burgos for Sportsnaut, and I have the pleasure of being joined by one of the top reporters in the industry when it comes to women's college basketball. He currently serves as the Associated Press's national women's basketball writer, and that is the one and only Doug Feinberg. Doug, thanks so much for the time today.
Thanks, Jason. Always great to chat.
So we are definitely going to talk some women's Final Four, but we really can't have a women's basketball, just college basketball conversation without talking Caitlin Clark. It wasn't until last year that like casual basketball fans she really popped up on their radar with her run in an NCAA tournament and even before that a little bit. But talk to me about your coverage of her. How early in her college basketball career or just basketball career did the hype start? Does it kind of go even back to high school before she even got to Iowa? Or in ways maybe she's surprised in her 4 years there and is surprised at how great she ended up becoming?
Well, I can go back to her freshman year, which was not a fun year for anybody because we were still sort of in COVID times. When I saw her play in the NCAA tournament in the bubble, I was fortunate enough to actually be in San Antonio and watch those games in person, but from afar. And just seeing her play, I'm like, wow, this girl is gonna be special, and she already was special at that point. She could score from anywhere. She had a flair to her game. Just was fun to watch and had a joy when she played. So that's when I first sort of got to see, wow, this player is be really, really good down the road, and she already was great at that point. And then just you're right, she sort of exploded onto the national scene. I think last year with the run that she had, the shots she was making, the passes she was throwing, like she just is a special, special player and one of the greatest all time.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was gonna go to now that you bring it up, because yeah, there is so much hype on her. There, I get the Stephen Curry comparisons, just not beyond like the unlimited range and stuff like that, but just her ball handling, her floor vision, like just a extremely talented, well-rounded player. So go more into that because I was going to ask: is she the best college basketball player you've ever seen? Is she the best scorer? Go into more depth on why you feel she is kind of the women's college basketball goat, and honestly, maybe just one of the best college basketball players, men and women ever.
Sure. I mean, I know everyone has their own definition of what a goat is, besides the four-legged creature we all love that is cute and fuzzy. But to me, to be the goat of college basketball, it's not just what you can do offensively or defensively. It's how many championships you've won is a big part of it. She to me is probably the offensive greatest player of all time right now, in the sense that what she did scoring and passing wise. But that doesn't make her the GOAT to me. I think Diana Taurasi is still the GOAT for winning 3 championships at Yukon, and 2 of those she basically carried the team the same way that Caitlin's doing right now, 2 titles. So it's tough to replace Diana as the GOAT. Breanna Stewart won 4 titles in 4 years, and obviously had 4 most outstanding players in those tournaments. That's really good. No one's ever going to be able to beat that. They can match it, but no one's ever going to beat that. I don't think anyone ever will. So that's why I think Caitlin is the offensive GOAT of all time, not the GOAT of all time as far as the best player ever in the history of women's college basketball.
Still is like a once in a generation talent, But for Iowa fans, now that we know she's headed to the WNBA after this season, how do they replace her? Do they have that infrastructure where they can find some good prospects and they're in the pipeline that can happen? Has she and her success and helped to elevate the program that finding replacements or even just a bunch of good prospects in the future is going to be easier now? Or does history show for the Iowa Hawkeyes women's team that this getting her had a little bit of luck involved and they could quickly lose relevancy in the next few years once she's gone?
Well, I don't think you can ever replace her. I mean, let's be honest. Like, you can't replace a player of that caliber. You can find people who can keep up what you've done on the court as far as advancing to the Final Four 2 straight years, winning 3 straight Big Ten titles. They have a really good class coming in. I think that they're going to be very competitive next year. I don't think they're going to be what they've done right now, but they're still going to be in the conversation for one of the top 25 teams in the country, and they're going to be, I think, a competitive team. But I think it's probably a lot to ask for them to be back in the Final Four next year, or even win the championship if they win 2 more games, based on who they're losing. Not just Caitlin, but other players too. But they're still going to be pretty relevant and pretty good. They're not going to fall off the map like, oh my God, we're never going to hear from Iowa again. And I think just the neat thing, Caitlin's a homegrown talent. I mean, she grew up in West Des Moines. She
Yep.
stayed home, and she's put Iowa back in relevancy the last few years. They were really good back in the early 2000s, the late 90s when Vivian Stringer was the coach there. The last time they made the Final Four before this current run. So I think it will not be another 20 years before Iowa is considered one of the top teams in the country again after this run that we're seeing right now is over.
Because of her success, and not just hers, just other stars like Angel Reese and a lot of different players that have been so good the last year. But she's been the face, and the ratings have shown it. The sports have been elevated. How how much has she been a part of this kind of rise in the opportunities for women's college basketball players? But because of what she's done in NIL and sponsorships, like, has she really helped bring the money-making, honestly, opportunities for college women's basketball players before the WNBA to unbelievable heights, and is it gives more reason to stay in college basketball as many years, and like, oh well, let me go to WNBA, that's where I can make money, or let me go to Europe. Like, now college basketball for the women's side is at the level of the men's.
So there's a couple things there. She has been a huge reason why the ratings have been through the roof. I mean, you had 12.3 million people watching that game the other day, which is insane. I mean, I thought you get maybe 7 to 8 million, a little bit under the number they had last year because it was on ESPN as opposed to ABC, but they blew the number away. And I was shocked by that. I was greatly surprised, and I was pleasantly surprised. It's great for the sport. And she's a huge reason why. I mean, you go to games and you see people, young boys and young girls, wearing 22 Iowa shirts, jerseys, sweatshirts, everything. She's just that type of player, whereas in the past you might see fans wearing UConn shirts, UConn jerseys, not specific to players, and they couldn't because NIL didn't exist back then, but they're more fans of what's on the front of the chest, so to speak, with the university than the name on the back. That's not the case anymore with NIL. Players can have their own merchandise out there so fans can support individual players as well as teams. And Caitlin Clark, Paige Beckers, Juju Watkins, Angel Reese, Hannah Hidalgo, Cameron Brink, just to name a few players right now, have been a huge reason why, and I think it's going to be a healthy thing for the future to sort of have this continued momentum going. It's not a moment for women's basketball. I think it's a movement, and we're seeing that in the last couple of years that it's growing. It's not just, okay, Caitlin's going to leave, the sport's going to go back down. There's so much future talent out there, current talent who are young, that are going to make this sport continue. As far as the WNBA and the college part of it, there's a huge misconception, I guess the best way to phrase it, that a lot of the NIL deals are going to not go with them if they went to pro. There's the NIL collective. So when schools have a collective at the school and they say, hey, we'll get some money to the kids when they're there, that won't translate. But Caitlin Clark's got State Farm, Gatorade, Buick, other major deals that I'd be shocked if they don't go with them when she becomes a pro. Aaliyah Boston, who was last year's Rookie of the Year and a great college career at South Carolina, made more money her first year in the pros in endorsements than she did in college. And I think Caitlin's be the same way. She's already signed up some pretty good deals when she turns pro in 2 weeks, or actually, yes, in at most 3 days or 4 days when this thing is over, the NCAA tournament. So it's going to carry on. It's become endorsements instead of NIL money, but they'll still do fine in the pros once they decide to end their college careers.
Speaking of pro, what do you think are her prospects in the WNBA? Do you think she can play like this at the next level? Or, dominating college players is a lot different, and it's going to be a while before she's in that bracket with the Breanna Stewarts, the Sabrina Ionescu's. Like, what do you think? So, what's your prospects?
So I think it takes a little bit longer for guards to become better pros in the past. Like, you look at Kelsey Plum. Her first couple years with San Antonio were not very good. People are like, oh, she's the biggest bust all time. Well, now she's won 2 championships with Vegas the last 2 years and is one of the top probably 10 or 15 players in the league. So I think it's harder for a guard to develop the skill set or have the skill set change to be pro ready. That said, I think Caitlin's going to be in a good spot because Indiana has Aaliyah Boston, so they have an established big already, so it's not like she has the weight of the world on her shoulders to carry Indiana. Yeah. She's a really good post player who she can throw the ball to. And the other part is she's a phenomenal passer. So she doesn't have to go out and score 30 a game. You want to put 3 girls on her, she'll just pass the ball to someone for an easy layup, easy shot, which makes her game translate, I think, even more so to the pros. So Is she going to put up 31 and
A lot of
10
people,
every game? Probably not. But she'll be, I think, pretty strong as far as like rookie of the year. Probably is a almost lock if she doesn't get hurt. If she puts up 15 and 8, that's a pretty good rookie season.
yeah. A lot of people will be focused on the Iowa Yukon game in the Final Four because of just how big Caitlin Clark and Yukon's brand are in sports stuff like that. But let viewers know why South Carolina versus NC State is just as fascinating a matchup as that one.
Well, if you just look at the start of the record, South Carolina's 36 and 0. There's only been 9 teams that have actually been able to run through the entire season undefeated. They're trying to be number 10, which is pretty special there. And it's funny because Dawn Staley said the other day in the Albany Regional when they won, it's okay. Talk about everybody else this week. It's fine. We're happy being under the radar. It's okay. I don't mind. But you know what? If we cut down the nets next Sunday at the championship game, then you'll start talking about us. And that's the time. So she's being smart about it. Last year they were in the same spot. They were undefeated going in. They lost to Iowa in the national semifinals in the Final Four game. So she's been in the spot. I think they'll be in pretty good shape. NC State, what a great story. I mean, the fact that they were unranked coming into the season, they had replaced a lot of people, and they went out early and beat Yukon and Colorado in the first month or so of the season to get some attention. Like, hey, we're pretty good here, even though we were picked 8th in the ACC. So I think they can give South Carolina problems. I think the stat is that NC State is 4-0 against AP top 25 teams this year, I think I saw, with each win by double digits. So they're not like they're sneaking by beating teams. They're finding ways to win convincingly, that it's not a fluke. And Wes Moore is a really good coach. Finally get to see him at the Final Four, which is awesome for him and that program. I would think that first game would be pretty exciting between South Carolina and NC State.
All right, so moving on to the one everybody's going to be watching, Yukon, Iowa. Like, what are your thoughts on it? Iowa is the higher seed, but Yukon is Yukon. How did you see that game playing out?
I don't think anyone can stop Caitlin Clark. I think you have to find ways to make her life more difficult when she gets shots off, but you can't stop her. So I think UConn is going to figure a way. They only play really 5.5 players because all the injuries they went through. And if you talk about a coaching job this year, Dawn Staley did an unbelievable job replacing a starting 5 to get back to the Final Four undefeated. Gino Auriemma lost 6 players for the season during the year, pretty much, and they're back in the Final Four with basically 5.5 players. So that's incredible on its own. I don't think they can try to run with them. I said the other day that if the score is in the 70s or 80s in the Iowa-LSU game, that Iowa's can probably win that game. I think sort of the same thing. I don't think UConn could get into a running game just because they don't have enough bodies to be able to run the floor consistently that long. Aaliyah Edwards, the talented post player for UConn, I think can have a good game against Iowa. If they sort of make it a half-court game, slow it down a bit. And obviously you have Paige Beckers, who is, if not the best player behind Caitlin Clark, equal to her. So you have a great matchup with Beckers and Clark. So if they can sort of neutralize each other, I think UConn's other players might be good enough to make it competitive and potentially win that game. But they can't. I think if the game's over 65 points, UConn might be in trouble for the winning team.
So based on your assessment, it seems like you're leading a rematch, South Carolina versus Iowa, this time in the final. Who wins it all? Does Caitlin Clark, to coin a phrase, and Cody Roach, does she finish the story, or is South Carolina just going to, surprise and be the next team to go undefeated all the way?
Wouldn't that be a storybook ending if Caitlin Clark wins and leads Iowa to a national championship in her last game, cuts down the nets in Cleveland on Sunday afternoon? I don't know. I think South Carolina is a different team than the one they beat last year in the sense that they have players who can hit from the outside. And I think that they have obviously the inside presence of Camila Cardozo, who's really, really strong, and Ashton Watkins off the bench is really strong as a defender. I think they have the athleticism and size to bother Clark a little more than they did last year. And I think they can hit from the outside. Everyone made a big deal how they basically, Iowa's playing off South Carolina shooters. Go ahead, shoot threes. We don't think you're going to make them. They didn't last year. You do that this year against Tahina Pow, Raven Johnson, Tess Johnson, you're probably going to end up losing.
So, last question. Now that Caitlin's leaving, everybody's kind of wondering who's the next? Who's the next face of it? And honestly, it just seems like the hype, and just based off of her performance this year, which has been unbelievable, it seems like it's Juju Watkins. Is she the next golden child? Is it her, or and can she threaten what seemed like an unbeatable record for scoring record that Caitlin Clark has, or is there somebody that people are not paying attention under the radar that could be the next one, maybe with Juju?
Juju's definitely the favorite to be the next one, so to speak, and she's done everything to deserve that title. She's a wonderful player. Her personality off the court is great, and that's the thing. I mean, Caitlin Clark, I've never seen her give a bad interview. She'll always find something to say and say the right thing to sort of keep the media interested, which is great. I mean, she's a 21, 22-year old young lady, and she never has a bad day with the media, and that's tough to do. As a media person, I have bad days, and I'm 51. So that to me is impressive. And Juju is the same way. That everything I've seen of her is that she's very good with the fans off the court, very good with the media, which is great. There are other names, though. I mean, Madison Booker in Texas led that team to a number one seed after they lost Rory Harmon. She's a phenomenal player. Hannah Hidalgo out of Notre Dame had a fantastic year on both ends of the court, and she's another wonderful young woman who I think is going to be very, very good for the next couple years. So you have those three. You have Phil Wiley on South Carolina is really good. So I don't think it's going to have to be one person carrying it. I think there's going to be a bunch of people. And the best part, Jace, they're all over the country. So it's not just like one area. So you have players all over. Yeah. So if you live in the West Coast, you can watch Juju. If you live in the Midwest, you can watch Hannah. If you live in the East Coast, you watch somebody else, which I think is great for the sport.